I was 8 years old the night it happened. It was one of those things you don't forget. One of those things that screws with you forever. To be honest, even though I'm a grown man now, I'm still trying to process it. It was a typical Saturday evening. My parents were heading out for a night alone, leaving me and my brother with the babysitter. Her name was Emma. She'd been our babysitter for about a year. Our previous sitter, Haley, had gotten married and moved to Modesto, so we needed a replacement. Emma fit right in. Everybody loved her, and we thought of her as part of the family. That night, Emma watched a movie with us. Well, to be more accurate, she let us watch a movie while she watched some other stuff on her phone. After our movie, Emma tucked us into bed. I asked for a glass of water and she promised to bring it up in a minute. But as I lay there waiting, I heard noises from downstairs. Not the usual sounds of someone moving around the kitchen. This was different. Muffled whispers, the clinking of silverware, drawers opening and closing too quickly. I was curious, so I crept out of bed, tiptoeing down the stairs. What I saw was pretty wild. Emma was standing in the kitchen. She was jerking her head in a weird way, and the look in her eyes made my blood run cold. It was dark and sinister, like something evil had stepped into Emma's body. She was talking to herself. Her voice was low and frantic. She was just mumbling. I couldn't make out what she was saying. She kept pulling open drawers and rifling through them, but it didn't look like she was searching for anything. It was like she was in some kind of trance. She grabbed a frying pan and used it to lightly bang on her head. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew it wasn't good. I must have made a noise because she suddenly stopped. She looked in my direction. I ducked back behind the wall. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. She started moving towards me, still holding the frying pan. I raced back up the stairs and locked the bedroom door. My little brother and I huddled together on the bed, listening as Emma's footsteps came up the stairs. She asked us if we were okay. Her voice was soft and gentle, but I knew it was just an act. I held my breath, praying she'd go away. The doorknob rattled, and then there was silence. For a moment, I thought she'd left, but then I heard it, the sound of metal scraping against the door. Emma was trying to pick the lock. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed Jake's hand and pulled him toward the window. We climbed out onto the roof, slid down the drain pipe, and ran like the wind to the neighbor's house. I pounded on the door until Mr. Jenkins answered. His face went pale when he saw us standing there, crying and shaking. He called the police, and within minutes, the house was swarming with officers. They found Emma sitting on the couch with the frying pan still in her hand. She didn't fight them. She didn't say anything. She just stared straight ahead like she wasn't really there. Then she spoke, and what she said was chilling. She told the officers the house was evil, said me and my brother were demons, and she had been sent by God to banish us to hell. In that moment, I was so grateful I had gone downstairs and witnessed that look in her eyes. I knew right then that if I hadn't locked our door, if my brother and I hadn't escaped, something truly awful would have happened. Wrapped in blankets, we sat on Mr. Jenkins's couch, still shaken but relieved. My parents arrived, and they were horrified to hear what had happened. As the police car drove away, we knew our nightmare was finally over. I didn't understand it then, not really. I just knew that the person I'd trusted, the person I'd thought of as almost like a big sister, had wanted to hurt me. It broke something inside me, something that's never fully healed. My parents moved us out of Willow Creek not long after that. Can you blame them? It was a pain to change schools and everything, but I understand why they wanted to make a fresh start. Emma was committed to a psychiatric facility. Apparently, she'd had some kind of psychotic break. I understand that she was sick, but the whole thing left me with serious trust issues. She wasn't the monster under the bed or the stranger in the shadows. She was someone we knew, someone we loved, and that's what makes it so terrifying. I still check the locks on my doors at night, and sometimes in my nightmares I still see her, just standing there staring at me, like death itself, with that dark, sinister look in her eyes. It happened 20 years ago when I was just 9, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I can still feel the cold knot of fear in my stomach whenever I think about that night. It was supposed to be just another evening with our babysitter, Megan. She'd been watching me and my little brother Sam for months. She wasn't our favorite babysitter of the ones we'd had, but we liked her well enough. That night she brought someone with her, her boyfriend Danny. And what happened after that really messed with my head. At first, everything seemed normal. Megan made us pizza and we all sat in the living room watching a movie, but Danny didn't sit with us. He stayed in the corner, pacing back and forth, his eyes darting around the room. Every now and then, he'd stop and stare at me and Sam, his lips curling into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. I tried to ignore him, focusing on the movie, but I could feel his gaze on me. After the movie, Megan sent us to bed. Sam and I shared a room, and as we climbed into our beds, I heard the low murmur of voices from the living room. Megan and Danny were arguing. I couldn't make out the words, but Megan sounded scared. I pulled the blankets up to my chin, my heart pounding. Sam was already asleep, his breathing soft and even, but I couldn't relax. Something was wrong. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. I strained to hear more, but the voices had dropped to a whisper. The fear gnawed at me, making it impossible to sleep. Danny stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The only light came from the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. He walked over to Sam's bed first. He just stood there, watching him sleep. Then he turned to me. I closed my eyes as tight as I could. I didn't want him to know I was awake. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him breathing. It sounded like he was standing right over me. Then I could feel his breath on my cheek, like he was leaning in real close. Part of me wanted to scream and run, but another part of me was frozen with fear. Don't know how long he stayed there, watching me. It felt like hours, but it was probably only a few minutes. Finally, he left, closing the door behind him. I opened my eyes. I've never felt so relieved. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just lay there, staring at the door, waiting for it to open again. Thankfully, it didn't. The next day, I told my mom what had happened that night. She was horrified. I don't know how she handled it exactly, but I know we never saw Megan again. And that was fine by me, because I was hoping it meant I'd never see Danny again either. Even now, as an adult, I can't shake the memory of Danny standing in our room, his eyes glinting in the dark. I've never been able to find out what happened to him, and maybe that's for the best. Some things are better left in the past. Jessica had been babysitting me and my little sister Emily for a few months. She was in college with curly brown hair and a bubbly personality that made us feel like we were hanging out with a cool older sister. She loved to play video games with us, and she'd always let us win. That night, she was fine when she first arrived. But as the night went on, something changed. She seemed off. Her laughter was louder, her movements clumsier, and eventually there was a smell on her breath. I was pretty young, but I was old enough to know what alcohol smelled like, and I was old enough to know that Jessica was drunk. She made us microwave popcorn and put on a movie, but she wasn't really watching it. She kept getting up and going into the kitchen, where she'd left the heavy-looking bag she'd brought with her. Each time she came back, her eyes looked glassier, her smile wobblier. Emily, who was only 6, didn't notice, but I did. Jessica's mood was dark. There was a meanness in her that I'd never seen before. She bumped into me on her way to the kitchen and yelled at me to watch where I was going, though she was the one who'd stumbled into me. Emily was getting sleepy. Jessica snapped at me, told me to put Emily to bed. I was smart enough to know that putting Emily to bed was Jessica's job, not mine. But I didn't argue. I did as I was told. I came back downstairs after. I wanted to keep an eye on Jessica and figure out a plan. With the way Jessica was acting, my instinct told me it wasn't a good idea to go to sleep with her in the house. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I sat on the couch pretending to watch the movie, while Jessica stumbled around the room, knocking into furniture and muttering under her breath. Then she disappeared into the kitchen again, and I heard the sound of glass clinking. When she came back, she was holding a bottle. A dark amber-colored bottle that smelled sharp and sour. She took a long swig from it, her face twisting as she swallowed. I mustered up all my courage and told her that my friend Tyler told me that his dad had gotten drunk once and hurt his mom. I told her Tyler said they took his dad to jail. She told me to mind my own business. Her tone was sharp and cold. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but I knew I didn't feel safe. I wanted to call my parents, but I was too scared. What if Jessica got mad? What if she hurt me? Things got worse as the night went on. Jessica started getting angry, yelling at the TV. At one point, she tripped and fell, knocking over a lamp. The sound of it shattering woke Emily up, and she came downstairs, rubbing her eyes and crying. Jessica screamed at her to go back to bed, her voice so loud and harsh that Emily started sobbing. I tried to comfort Emily, but I was shaking too. Jessica kept pacing back and forth, muttering angrily to herself. Emily clung to her teddy bear, her eyes wide with fear. Eventually, Jessica collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. Seizing the moment, I quietly grabbed the phone and dialed my parents' number. My heart pounded as the phone rang, and I whispered for them to come home quickly. My parents came home, and when they arrived, they found Jessica passed out on the couch, the empty bottle still clutched in her hand. They were horrified when they learned what had happened. I never saw Jessica again after that night. I asked my parents about her a couple of times, but they always changed the subject. Even now, as an adult, I can't shake the memory of that night. The smell of alcohol, the sound of Jessica's slurred words, the fear in Emily's eyes. It's all still so vivid. I'm 28 now, and I've never taken a drink. Not even once. That night with Jessica showed me how alcohol can change a person and turn me off booze forever.